For nearly a million years, the banks of the Han River in central China kept a silent secret. Beneath layers of soil and stone lay the shattered remains of a human skull, crushed, distorted, and forgotten. When it was unearthed in 1990, scientists called it Yunxian Skull. They thought it belonged to an obscure branch of Homo erectus, one more fossil in the long, confusing story of early humans. Then, for decades, nothing. The skull sat in museum drawers, too damaged to tell its story. But time has a strange way of keeping its mysteries. Decades later, technology would breathe new life into this fossil. Using high-resolution CT scans and advanced 3D modeling, researchers carefully reconstructed every broken fragment, reversing the crushing force of a million years. Piece by piece, the skull took shape again, until a face emerged, a face that had not been seen since the dawn of humanity. And that's when everything changed. The new reconstruction revealed something extraordinary. Yunxian Skull didn't quite fit anywhere. It wasn't fully Homo erectus, but it wasn't Homo sapiens either. It seemed to stand right at the crossroads between them, between who we were and who we would become. Suddenly, what was once a forgotten fossil began to challenge one of the most fundamental stories we tell about ourselves: where we came from. For generations, we've believed that modern humans began in Africa roughly 300,000 years ago, spreading out to replace older species. But what if that story is only part of the truth? What if the real birthplace of humanity wasn't where we always thought it was? Because this single, crushed skull rebuilt with light, data, and patience may have just rewritten the opening chapter of the human story. And its echoes reach far beyond China, deep into the origins of us all. The story begins on a quiet ridge above the Han River, where workers and archaeologists uncovered not one but 3 ancient human crania across 3 decades. The first skull emerged in 1989, the second in 1990, and a third was reported from the same Yunxian area in 2022. Among them, the second skull became the most puzzling. When it was lifted from the ground, it was a ruin of bone plates and crushed arcs, warped by the slow weight of earth and time. For years, Yunxian Skull looked like a scientific dead end, a relic too mangled to speak. Notes were filed, plaster molds were made, and then the pieces rested in storage, as if the past had closed its mouth. That silence ended when a new generation of tools met a very old mystery. Researchers began with high-resolution computed tomography, scanning the entire block and each fragment to capture the hidden internal geometry of bone. Structured light scanning mapped the exposed surfaces with fine detail. Digital technicians then segmented bone from the encasing rock, tracing borders millimeter by millimeter until stone peeled away from skull in the virtual space. Every shard was oriented, cleaned of distortion artifacts, and prepared for a careful return to its original position. Where fractures had shifted pieces out of place, a 3-dimensional realignment step nudged them back, not by guessing their mirror image as in landmark mirroring, but by explicitly undoing the fragmentation and the displacement introduced by burial. This approach treated the skull not as a soft object that had been bent, but as a jigsaw scattered and misaligned by pressure and time. To fill gaps, the team drew on measurements from the first Yunxian Skull, using its preserved regions as anatomical scaffolding for parts missing in Yunxian Skull. Iteration after iteration, the virtual model tightened, sutures meeting sutures, vault curving to vault, the face lifting from the tablet screen. And then there it was. For the first time in a million years, a recognizable human profile looked back. The result was the first complete shape for Yunxian Skull, a long, low cranial vault, a forward-projecting face, the strong bridge of the nose, and the thick brow ridge that had survived despite the crushing. Suddenly, the fossil once thought useless became a key. The third skull from 2022 now waits in the wings, its own digital reconstruction expected to test and refine the emerging picture from this site. For the first time, a face from a million years ago looked back at us. But who was this person? When the reconstructed skull was finally revealed, it defied every label that scientists tried to place on it. The first thing that stood out was its size. The cranial cavity measured about 1,143 cubic centimeters larger than any typical Homo erectus of its time. yet smaller than both Neanderthals and modern humans. The shape of the skull was long and low, with a broad, flat vault when viewed from the side. Its brow ridge was thick and heavy, shadowing deep-set eye sockets. The face projected forward, the nasal bones jutted sharply, and the cheekbones spread wide but flat. Yet, behind that strong face, something was missing. The angled occipital bone of classic Homo erectus and the distinctive occipital bun that marked Neanderthals. It was, in every sense, a mosaic, an intricate mix of primitive and modern traits fused in one skull. It carried the muscular architecture of ancient humans, but also hints of the refined proportions seen in later species. It looked less like a straight ancestor and more like a bridge linking the rugged past to the dawn of Homo sapiens. Its thick bones echoed Homo erectus, but the facial proportions aligned more closely with Homo longi, a mysterious lineage from northeastern Asia, sometimes called the Dragon Man. Mokas. To understand where Yunxian truly belonged, scientists went beyond visual comparison. They used a powerful analytical method called geometric morphometrics, an approach that quantifies shape rather than simply describing it. The team mapped 533 anatomical landmarks across 179 fossil and modern human skulls, plotting them within a vast morphospace, a multidimensional landscape of form. When the data settled, Yunxian clustered not with Homo erectus from Java or Africa, but with fossils like Dali, Jinyoshan, and Harbin specimens, all discovered in East Asia and sharing a curious blend of old and new. Together, these fossils form what researchers now call the Homo longi clade, a distinctly Asian branch of the human family tree. According to the latest phylogenetic analyses, this lineage stands as the sister group to Homo sapiens, closer to us than to the Neanderthals. The discovery of the Harbin skull in 2021 had already hinted that Asia played a far greater role in our evolution than once imagined. Yunxian strengthens that argument, positioning China not at the margins but at the crossroads of human origins. On the grand tree of life, Yunxian seems to sit at the very fork where one branch led to us and the other to our long-lost cousins. And if this skull truly stands near that split, the next question becomes impossible to ignore. When exactly did that divide begin? To understand where Yunxian truly belongs, scientists needed more than shape, they needed time. Using two complementary models, parsimony analysis and Bayesian tip dating, researchers mapped out the evolutionary branching of early humans. Parsimony seeks the simplest explanation, connecting fossils through shared features with the fewest possible evolutionary steps. Bayesian dating adds a probabilistic clock, blending morphology with the known ages of fossils to estimate when key splits occurred. Together, these tools built a timeline that stretched deeper into the past than anyone had expected. The results were startling. According to the analysis, the Neanderthal lineage had already broken away first, around 38 million years ago. Shortly after, at about 1.32 million years ago, a new branch emerged, one that split into two sister clades, Homo longi, the mysterious Asian lineage, and the Homo sapiens clade, our own family line. The Homo longi clade itself appeared around 1.2 million years ago, while the earliest sapiens clade arose about 1.02 million years ago. In other words, the roots of modern humans reach nearly a million years deeper than the long-accepted story. For decades, textbooks have told us that Homo sapiens evolved in Africa roughly 300,000 years ago, long after separating from a common ancestor shared with Neanderthals and Denisovans about 500,000 to 600,000 years ago. But Yunxian reconstruction forces a new perspective. If these dates hold, it means the human tree began branching far earlier by as much as 700,000 to a million years, and that our evolutionary saga wasn't confined to Africa alone. Instead, several human groups may have coexisted across Africa and Eurasia, occasionally mixing, sharing genes, and exchanging traits long before modern humans took shape. As British paleoanthropologist Chris Stringer from London's Natural History Museum put it, this changes a lot of thinking because it suggests that by 1 million years ago, our ancestors had already split into distinct groups. Lead Chinese researcher Shiyun echoed that sentiment. Based on our new discovery, we challenge the old timelines of human evolution. Their voices reflect a growing shift, one that sees human origins not as a single linear story, but as a braided river with many channels flowing together and apart. Yet not everyone is convinced. Alwyn Scaly, a geneticist from Cambridge, urged caution, noting that estimating such ancient divergences is inherently uncertain. Those numbers are very difficult to do regardless of whether you're using genetic or fossil evidence. From the Smithsonian, Ryan McRae agreed that Yunxian's anatomy fits with Homo longi and Denisovan traits, but warned that the data may not yet be strong enough to fix those divergence times. Even with these debates, the implications are profound. The so-called muddle in the middle, that confusing stretch between 1 million and 300,000 years ago, when fossils refused to fit neatly into categories, now begins to clear. Instead of random variation, those skulls might represent distinct populations that had already branched from the main trunk. The old out-of-Africa-only model now looks less like a single exodus and more like a long, intertwined story of migrations, meetings, and minglings across continents. Science, after all, is a living process. It evolves, corrects itself, and grows just as we did. For more than half a century, the story of humanity has been told as a one-way journey out of Africa. In that familiar tale, early humans evolved on the African plains, then spread across Eurasia, replacing whatever ancient species they met along the way. But the Yunxian discovery invites us to see a different map, one where Asia is not the end of the story, but the center of it. Across northern China, a web of fossils now points to a deep regional lineage, a network of ancient people stretching from Harbin in the northeast to Dali in the center to Jinyushan near the Liaoning Hills. These skulls share striking similarities: large cranial capacities, broad faces, and that same blend of primitive and derived traits seen in Yunxian too. Together, they form the mosaic known as the Homo longi network, evidence that Eastern Asia was not simply a destination for wandering Africans, but a dynamic cradle where evolution kept experimenting. Some scientists now propose that the ancestors of Homo sapiens may have lived not only in Africa, but also across Western and Eastern Asia, moving back and forth through open corridors of grassland and forest. The geography of the early Pleistocene was far from static. Ice ages advanced and retreated, sea levels rose and fell, and deserts expanded, breaking habitats into scattered islands of life. Each pocket of humans adapted, diverged, and sometimes reconnected when climates warmed again. In this ever-shifting landscape, evolution was not a straight arrow. It was an intricate web of crossings, isolations, and reunions. Genetic studies already hint at this complexity. The traces of Denisovan DNA in modern Asians and Pacific Islanders, the lingering Neanderthal genes in Europeans, all speak of millennia of contact and exchange. If Yunxian too truly stands near the root of both the Homo longi and Homo sapiens branches, then the crossroads of human history may stretch across the vast heart of Eurasia, not just one continent. By 1 million years ago, 3 major human lineages, the Neanderthals, the Homo longi group, and early Homo sapiens, may have already diverged yet continued to share the same planet, sometimes meeting, sometimes mixing, for nearly 1 million years. Picture that ancient Earth. Glaciers at the poles, savannas and steppes between, and scattered families of early humans gazing at the same moon we see tonight, different faces of the same enduring story. Evolution, it turns out, was never a straight line. It was a living web, and Asia was one of its strongest threads. In the end, the story of Yunxian 2 is not just about a fossil, it is about a moment, a fragile intersection in time, when 2 great branches of humanity began to part ways. Somewhere around 1 million years ago, in the heart of what is now central China, the ancestors of Homo sapiens and Homo longi may have stood side by side, unaware that their paths were diverging. The Yunxian Skull captures that turning point, frozen in stone and silence, a witness to the birth of who we are. Today, that crushed skull has been reborn not in flesh and blood, but in pixels and light. Through the lens of science, it has begun to speak again, whispering the echoes of our earliest ancestors. It reminds us that we are all connected, not by borders or colors or nations, but by deep time. We are all branches of the same ancient tree, still growing, still reaching toward the unknown sky. And the story isn't finished. The third Yunxian skull, discovered in 2022, is now being digitally reconstructed. When it's ready, it may confirm or challenge everything we think we've learned so far. That's the beauty of discovery. Every answer opens 100 new questions. History, it turns out, is not set in stone. It breathes, it changes, and it begins again. The story of Yunxian 2 is a reminder that evolution is not behind us, it's within us, still unfolding with every new find, every new idea. If you believe that our story is still being written, share this journey and subscribe to keep exploring who we really are. Because sometimes, to see the future, we must first look into the eyes of a face that has been waiting for 1,000,000 years to look back.